Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadara Shiva Sati Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Shamakan Radhakan Gitter Govardhan Ki Jai Mayapurdam Ki Jai Vrindavanam Ki Jai Jamuna Devi Ki Jai Ganga Devi Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai ISKCON Philadelphia Ki Jai Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Gaur Premanande Hari Bol. All glories ye assembled devotees Hari Krishna. All glories ye assembled devotees Hari Krishna. All glories ye assembled devotees Hari Krishna. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga Hari Hari Bol. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravana Pacharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyat Padesha Tarane. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskrita Naram Shaiva Narottama Devam Sarasvatim Vyasyam Tatotayam Adirayat Nastapraya Shirabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevya Bhagavati Uttamashloki Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. So, good morning, everyone. Hope you're having a nice Labor Day weekend. So we'll jump into Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto, second chapter, verse 8. So I'll read the verse 3 times and then we can all take turns repeating. Kechitsva dehantar heyadya vakashe pradesha mantram purusham vashantam chaturbhujam kanjarata ganga sankha gadadaram dharanaya smaranti. Kachitsva dehantar hiraya vakashe pradesha matram purasham vashantam chaturbhujam kanjaratanga sankhya gadadaram dharanaya smaranti. Kechitsva dehantar hiraya vakashe pradesha matram purasham vashantam Chaturbhujam kanjaratanga sankam gadadaram dharanaya smaranti. Anyone else like to give a shot?
Kachitva dehantar hridaya vakashe pradesha matram purusham vasantam Chaturbhujam kanja ratanga sankha gadadharam dharayana smaranti. Hare Krishna.
Anyone else?
Chitsva dehantar hridaya vakashe pradeshe matram purusham vasantam chaturbhujam kanja rathanga shankha gadadharam dharanaya smaranti.
Anyone else? Give it a shot. Going once, going twice. Okay, we'll do word for word translation. Kachit, others. Svadeha antaha, within the body. Hirdaya avakashe, in the region of the heart. Pradesha mantram, measuring only 8 inches. Purusham, the personality of Godhead. Vashantam, residing. Chatu bhujam, with 4 hands. Kanya, lotus. Ratha angya, the wheel of a chariot. Shankha, conch shell. Gada dharam, and with a club in the hand. Dharanaya, conceiving in that way. Smaranti, do meditate upon him. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Others conceive of the personality of Godhead residing within the body in the region of the heart and measuring only 8 inches, with 4 hands carrying a lotus, a wheel of a chariot, a conch shell, and a club, respectively. Purport. The all-pervading personality of Godhead resides as Paramatma in the heart of each and every living entity. The measurement of the localized personality of Godhead is estimated to expand from the ring finger to the end of the thumb, more or less 8 inches. The form of the Lord described in the verse with this distribution of different symbols. beginning from the lower right hand up and down to the lower left hand, with lotus, wheel of chariot, conch shell, and club, respectively. It is called Janardana, or the plenary portion of the Lord who controls the general mass. There are many other forms of the Lord with varied situations of the symbols of lotus, conch shell, etc., and they are differently known as Purushottama, Achutya, Narasimha, Trivikram, Hirikesha, Keshava, Madhava, Anirudh, Pradyumna, Shankarshan, Sridhar, Vasudev, Damodar, Janardhan, Narayana, Hari, Padmanabha, Vamana, Madhusuna, Govinda, Krishna, Vishnumurti, Adoksaja, and Upendra. These 24 forms of the localized personality of Godhead are worshipped in different parts of the planetary system. And in each system, there is an incarnation of the Lord having a different Vaikuntha planet in the spiritual sky, which is called the Paravyoma. There are many other hundreds and scores of different forms of the Lord, and each and every one of them has a particular planet in the spiritual sky, of which the material sky is only a fragmental offshoot. The Lord exists as Purusha, or the male enjoyer, although there is no comparing him to any male form in the material world. But all such forms are Advaita, non-different from one another, and each of them is eternally young. The young Lord with 4 hands is nicely decorated as described below. Sri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapi 28 Buddhalay, Swami Rupakidamayam Dadati Spadvadantikam, Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadara, Shri Sapti Gora Bhakti Vrinda, Panchakalpa Trivya Shakra, Sindhu Devi, Chapati, and one Bhagavad and Om Vishnu Gadai Krishna Prasad, which were issued at the conference, listening to change the city that I would now trust, which I probably got at the time and I would like to share. So I'll go back and read the translation again, and then we'll get into a couple of the key points of this report. Others conceive of the personality of Godhead residing within the body of the region of the heart and measuring only 8 inches, with 4 hands carrying a lotus, a wheel of a chariot, a conch shell, and a club, respectively. So here, this chapter starts off with kind of discussing the materialist view, right? So we get an understanding in a couple of verses prior to this about the materialist view, the non-permanent, and really focusing on the material activities. And here, this is providing the counter thought, or of what Bhakti yogis conceive of, which is really that the personality of Godhead is within the body. And so that is making it that worshipable form within our hearts as well. So not focusing on the material energies outside of us and really fixing our energies on the non-permanent, but really looking on the internal and looking within and understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead's placement, our placement within us, placement within the universe. And so we get into this a lot. The Bhagavatam provides many different explanations, and the same thing with Bhagavad Gita. We have a lot of different opportunities to understand the Lord's presence and the Lord's activities within this universe, within the spiritual universe as well. So this is kind of zeroing in a little bit on the Paramatma, which is the Lord in our hearts. And when I was preparing for this lecture this morning, I was really thinking about how many times this is discussed within Bhagavatam, within Bhagavad Gita, that really understanding the Lord within our hearts is an important aspect of our realization. It's an important aspect of our relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because we have those, the 3 different types of realization. We know that there's Brahma, there's the Brahman effulgence, right? And then we have the Paramatma, so we're getting a little bit closer. And then we have the Bhagavan, which is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So as Prabhupada has described it, it's like seeing a train approaching and seeing just the light of the train coming through the tunnel. And that's kind of equated to the Brahman effulgence, which is really not a clear picture, but we can see the energies of the Lord, but we don't have a clear understanding of what's behind those energies until the train comes closer and we see, oh, it's actually a train. But then the train gets closer, which is the train would be kind of equated to the Paramatma. And as it gets closer, we realize there's activity. So that's the Bhagavan is the personality of Godhead. But for today, we're going to focus on the middle one, right? We're going to focus on the Paramatma, the super soul within us, because this is, I think for some people, we may find it relatable because we might feel something in our hearts. There's a connection. There's some sort of energy that we understand to be in our hearts that is God. This is our connection point to the Supreme. And so to have a better understanding of this connection point, we're given these different verses in Bhagavad Gita, in the Bhagavatam. And the Bhagavad Gita has a verse. It kind of sums it up in chapter 18, which is really the summation of our devotional practice. In 1861, Ishvar Sarvabhutanam, Hirdidesa Arjuna Tistari, Brahmaya Sarvabhutani, Yantrai Rudani Mayaya. This is a very well-known verse. And the translation is, the Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated as on a machine made of the material energy. And I always, when I think of Bhagavad Gita and Paramatma explanations, my brain always comes to this verse. And I think it really helps depict the what the super soul, how the super soul is situated within the material body. It's directing the wanderings of the living entities who are seated as on a machine, right? As on a machine, which is a really interesting way to picture this material body. It's a machine. It's this machinery we might refer to it, with all the heart and the organs and the electricity of the nervous system. So it really is as a machine, and it's made of material energy. Right. But even though this body, this brain, all of this around are the soul and the super soul, which are sitting next to each other, as two birds on a branch, the soul and the super soul are here, but they are eternal. They're spiritual. So, and this is something that we can really meditate on and wrap our heads around, is the fact that we have this material body and these material energies are surrounding us, but there's also that spark of spiritual energy that resides in each and every one of us. Every single person, every single living entity on this planet has the spark of the Supreme, has spiritual energy within them. So when we think about that, we can also just look at the people around us and think, wow, that person also has spiritual energy within them. It may be covered over, but it's there. So when we start to bring that realization to the forefront of our lives, we can look at one another and say, oh, this person has spiritual energy of God. This person has the spiritual energy of God. And that can hopefully bring about some understanding and compassion for the living entities. But going back to this purport for today, and kind of talking a little bit more about the Paramatma. So what is the Paramatma? So the Paramatma is God's energies. It's the expansion of God in each and every one of us. And that Paramatma is sitting there observing, right? Because we know that there's a verse about the soul and the super soul. The soul is observing. He's observing the soul, the jiva. And the super soul will engage at a point when the soul is acknowledging that the super soul's existence, basically. So we have to come to that understanding of that Paramatma realization, before we can really start engaging in that relationship with Paramatma, which is an aspect of our relationship with the Supreme. And so with this purport, Prabhupada is sharing with us that the living entity gets what he deserves and is carried by the material body, which is created in that material energy under the direction of the super soul. So the super soul is observing everything, and it's also deciding what body we get in the next lifetime. The super soul is the knower of the past, present, and future, and remains the witness of all activities. Therefore, all activities of the living entities are directed by the super soul as well. So this Paramatma, the super soul, is there within us and directing the activities, but also remaining, as I said, there's also that observation aspect of the super soul as well, that Paramatma. And so there's other Bhagavad Gita verses as well. There's several that emphasize Krishna is in the heart. So in chapter 13, Krishna, the verse is saying that Krishna he's the source of light in all luminous objects. He is beyond the darkness of matter and is unmanifested. He is knowledge. He is the object of knowledge, and he's the goal of knowledge. He is situated in everyone's heart. Again, so we have that clear distinction that God is in everyone's heart. And so if we ever question that, that understanding, and then we have plenty of verses that can give us that. However, things to consider with this understanding is that it's also important to remember that that this relationship can become very, very covered over. And so this is why it's important to practice our devotional activities. Another aspect of this purport, Prabhupada is explaining to us that there's different forms. And so there's these 24 different forms of the localized personality of Godhead. And so we're given all of these different names, and we've heard them all in various different parts of the Bhagavatam, or just in lectures. So we're familiar with these different aspects. So oftentimes we might even hear like Narayan. Hear about the Narayan form of Krishna in our hearts. So this is part of that, the deeper understanding of Paramatma in general. And so this, gets very technical. So we're talking about the Lord being very, very much the enjoyer. And this is going into this Purusha. This took me back also to chapter 13, discussing Purusha and Prakriti. So Purusha and Prakriti, Purusha is the enjoyer, Prakriti is the energies, and the material nature, the nature. So we try and be the enjoyers, but Adi Purusham, Govinda Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. What is Govinda Adi Purusham? Govinda, the supreme enjoyer. He's a supreme enjoyer. And so the supreme enjoyer means that although we as living entities really try hard to enjoy, that ultimately the supreme enjoyer is the Lord, Adi Purusham. And so when we understand our role as the living entities that are, if we see Krishna, we see the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the supreme enjoyer, and then we then try to do things for the Lord, then the Lord becomes happy, and that supreme enjoyment can kind of filter through. So if we are pleasing to the Lord, like Prabhupada uses the example, if we're watering the roots of the tree, then everyone will benefit. The whole tree will benefit. But if we're trying to just water the leaves, then only the leaves will gain some benefit. So if we're in our lives trying to just enjoy without Krishna in that process, then we're only watering the leaves, and we're only gaining a minute benefit from that, barely anything. But if we enjoy through the service of the Lord, then everything is benefiting. Then we will become happy. We will become nourished through that process of serving the Lord and making the Lord happy. Because where does the Lord's enjoyment come from? Well, we only know through the Bhagavatam, but it comes from serving his devotees. The Lord is not happier than when he's serving his devotees. So how do we serve the Lord? Well, we serve him through serving the devotees. And this is the process that we can then, the Adi Purusham aspect of that supreme enjoyment then filters through everything. And then we can become fulfilled. We can become joyful in that service to the Lord by serving the Lord's devotees, serving the Lord and making the Lord happy so that he is filling our hearts. So it's this circle, right? Because if the Lord's in our hearts and then we're serving the Lord through our activities and the Lord's also in our hearts emanating, then we have this loop of joy, really. We have this loop of nourishment because now, but as soon as we go outside of that loop, and as soon as we turn our energies here and we're like, nope, I'm going to just act in the material energies. I'm going to just try and serve myself, and only serve for, my business or whatever it is. I'm serving in a way that I feel like I can get the most benefit. Then if we're taking Krishna out of that loop, we're taking the Lord out of that loop, then how are we getting the nourishment here? How's that coming back through? So we really want to focus on that getting into that channel of service. When we get into that channel of serving, then we naturally are going to be nourished, but that's not the intention, right? The intention is just that we want to serve the devotees because that's what we know. That's our position is to serve the Lord by serving his devotees. And that will naturally bring us joy and bring us happiness in our everyday lives. And that's something we can strive for. And so this concept of coming back to our hearts and the Paramatma in our hearts, there's a concept that I've learned about years ago, and I've studied a little bit, is this concept of Chaitya Guru. So if you've heard of the Chaitya Guru is actually the guru in our hearts. Chaitya Guru is the guru within our hearts that gives us guidance. However, and this is the guidance, this is another name for Paramatma, for super soul, because the Chaitya Guru is God, is that spark of energy of God. But we have to remember that with the Chaitya Guru, he's only giving, directions and consulting, telling the living entities directly to those that are advanced and can cleansed enough to hear that direction. And everyone else, we are maybe getting smatterings of flickerings of insight, but it's really those pure devotees that are really getting that like direct instruction from Chaitya Guru. So Chaitya Guru is within us, but how do we get to that understanding of the Chaitya Guru? How do we come to find ourselves in a relationship with Chaitya Guru? And this is something that is the process that Prabhupada has given us, right? Through Vaidhi Bhakti. Vaidhi Bhakti is the process of devotional service through the rules and regulations with a spiritual master. That basically is in a nutshell, right? So we have this sadhana bhakti. The sadhana bhakti is the practice, our daily practice. This is the sadhana. We're practicing yogis, we're practicing bhaktas and bhaktins. And, it's an important way, maintaining that beginner mindset. In my opinion, I think maintaining that beginner mindset can be really beneficial. I've trained in martial arts for many years, and the beginner mindset is a really critical aspect to training, because if we maintain a beginner's mindset, we're always open to hearing something new. We're always open to gaining new insight or new understanding around something we may have already thought we had a pretty good understanding of anyway. So if we maintain in our minds that sadhana bhakti mentality, that Vaidhi Bhakti mentality, regardless of how we're progressing, but the mentality is of that sadhana bhakti, the Vaidhi Bhakti perspective, that I am a beginner, I am a practicing devotee, I am trying to become a devotee, I'm trying to become a servant of the Lord, I am working on gaining the insights that will help me progress in my Krishna consciousness. That help me become Krishna conscious, which we throw these terms around a lot, Krishna conscious and devotional service, but what we're really saying is to be Krishna conscious means that we are thinking about the Lord 24/7. Our activities are there to please the Lord 24/7. That is true Krishna consciousness, that we're conscious of the Lord constantly. And so I'm personally working toward that. I definitely know advanced devotee. I know that I have a lot of work to go until I get to that point of being Krishna conscious. So I'm working toward that. So leaning deeply into the Vaidhi Bhakti, those processes that will help us gain access to that Chaitya Guru, more intense, more deep access to that Chaitya Guru, that we can get those instructions. But in the meantime, the good thing is that we do have, we have these senior devotees. If we have a spiritual master that's on this planet still, we do have those opportunities to have a conversation with our spiritual master. We have Prabhupada's books, which give us all the answers, really. If we read them closely, everything is there for us. So we have all of these tools available to us that help to give us understanding of our true nature. What is our nature as living entities? Well, it depends. Our nature is to be a servant of the Lord, but how we visualize what our true nature is depends on our conscious awareness of that true nature. Are we aware? Do we have an awareness of what our goal is? And I was actually having a conversation with someone last week about this concept of goals, right? So if we have this goal of developing a relationship with God, and it's fixed in our minds that this is our goal. I want to have a relationship with Krishna. That is my goal. Nothing else matters. This is my goal. Then all of the activities in our lives will align to that goal because we're in alignment with that goal. So, for example, in a material example would be if I have this goal of running a marathon, then I'm going to follow the set plan for running 5 miles every day, and then working up to 7 miles every day, and then 10 miles once a day. I have a lot of friends that ran marathons, so I know the process. So you work up to getting to that point of being able to run a marathon. You train for 6 months to run that marathon, and you really dedicate your time and energy, your nutrition, your schedule is so much focused on this training process to run that marathon. But let's say you're talking to your friends at dinner one night and you're like, yeah, I think I want to run a marathon in the spring. And your friend's like, oh, great idea. That's great. I love it. And then you go home and you're like, yeah, I think I'm going to run a marathon. But you're like, then you start thinking like, it's a lot of work. I don't know if that's really, I really want to run a marathon. And then you start thinking, well, I think I want to run a marathon. But every day you think to yourself, I really should go out and run those 5 miles. Oh gosh, that's really going to be hard. I didn't sleep well last night, or I have an early meeting, and gosh, tomorrow I'm gonna do those. I'm gonna get those 5 miles in for sure. I'm gonna get those 5 miles in. Next day you wake up, you're like, I'm pretty hungry. I think I'll just have some breakfast first, and then I'm gonna run that marathon, and then I'm gonna run those 5 miles. And you're like, I gotta get to work, and so you see what can happen, right? Because the person who says they're going to run the marathon to their friend, and then they're not really fixed on the concept of running a marathon, suddenly they're like, I don't know, I have other things to do. Life's pretty busy right now. I'll next week, right? And suddenly they're a week out from the marathon. They've already signed up, and they're like, this isn't happening. I did that with the Broad Street Run. I told my friend I was going to run the Broad Street Run, and I kept pushing off. And finally I was like, I'm not going. She brought my shirt home for me. But it was one of those things. It wasn't really a goal. It was her goal, but it wasn't my goal to run Broad Street Run. So if we really want to progress in anything, we really need to align with that goal, or else we're going to find ourselves making a whole lot of excuses to not get there, because we're matched up. And so that's the thing with any activity, and it includes Krishna consciousness. And so, we have these processes. We have Paramatma, and we know that Paramatma is there intellectually. We can say, okay, I know that there's Paramatma here. I know that there is this potential for relationship. I know Krishna's out there. I know we have the temple and we have all these activities, but what am I really focusing my energy on right now? And is my goal really Krishna based? Is it to develop my bhakti, or are there other things in mind? And then this is no, judgment. This is more of an internal conversation, that if we find ourselves maybe struggling in, to get things done, or to get service, or to get our rounds in, or get reading in, it's important that we look within and say, what's really my goal right now in life? And that it might be something that our goal to develop our bhakti may not be the top goal, and things slip, and that's life, right? That's why we're here. We have these discussions so that we can bring it to our own attention and say, okay, yeah, maybe this is why I'm struggling. So we don't have to beat ourselves up so much. We can just look and say, oh, it's actually because my top goal right now is this, and this is superseding any goal that I have regarding my spiritual development. And that's just where I'm at right now. So when the more that we can just sit in that Vaidhi Bhakti space and that beginner mindset, and allow ourselves to really cultivate a practice, and cultivate a practice that's manageable, that we can really, follow the process of Prabhupada, follow the process of Bhakti Yoga. We have the 9 processes of Shravanam, Kirtanam, Shmarnam, Vishnu, Padnam, Sevanam. So we have these processes of devotional service that are available to follow. The first one is Shravanam, hearing, right? So one goal that I've been making for myself is just coming to Bhagavatam class more frequently in the morning. Like, I can do this, I can make a goal for myself to come to Bhagavatam class in the mornings and do this more frequently. So this is one thing that I'm working toward personally, is just making that more of an effort for myself. And so Shravanam, Kirtanam, and so we have all of these steps. Now, getting to the Chaitya Guru, and this is, like I said, this Chaitya Guru is there to guide us, is there to instruct us. But sometimes if we're not getting the instruction internally, this is when we in our beginning stages, and the beginning stages could be lifetimes, right? So we have to remember that we've probably been on this path for quite some time, like lifetimes worth, to be able to land here. We've probably put some coins in our piggy bank from the prior lifetime. We know that this spiritual savings account keeps building up to bring us to the same point in the next life, so that we can progress forward. So if we've made it this far, then we've probably put some coins in the piggy bank last lifetime, right? So, and maybe the lifetime before that and the lifetime before that. So we just want to remember that hopefully we want to go back to Godhead in this lifetime, so we can do those things to carry us forward. And also in that process, remembering that the Shravanam Kirtanam is the beginning process of that. So the Chaitya Guru, we follow that through the spiritual master, through the advanced senior devotees within our community. So there's plenty of opportunities for there's plenty of opportunities for us to connect and receive the help that we need in moving forward. And I want to take it back to a couple other points from this purport for today. So we talked a lot about the Param Atma. We talked a lot about how we can really grow in our spiritual life and the goals of spiritual life, and then going back to the understanding of that. Here in this purport, it says the Lord is Purusha, as the enjoyer. So we talked about the Lord being the Adi Purusham. Adi Purusham is the supreme enjoyer of everything. So in this process of understanding all of the Lord's expansions and understanding all of the Lord's personalities and all of the Lord's pastimes, what we're really doing is we're understanding the different relationships with God. We're understanding the aspects of God and of the Supreme, and how that aspect, also comes into illuminating the spirit, the material energies. While, it's a very complex thing. I mean, we don't, in other religions, this depth of understanding of God doesn't always come out in discussions, but here we're actually learning about who God is, what his activities are, many of his different names. In Christianity, God's just most of the time just God, right? So we don't have any other much more of a description than that. We know of the Son of God and Mother Mary and all of these different seemingly expansions of God, but we don't know much about God directly. We only know about the expansions like Jesus and Mother Mary. So here we're learning about the direct expansions of God through the Bhagavatam and through the Vedas. And so this is to give us a better understanding. It's not for us to overly intellectualize, because the whole point of having this knowledge is just to help us better navigate the material energies. So that if we know that these actually are material energies, and this is a machine that is wrapped around this spark of spiritual energy, and if we recognize that this machine is material and it's non-permanent, that it will go away at some point, then we can focus our energies on cultivation of the permanent, of the eternal. And if we focus our energies on cultivating the eternal, that means we're cultivating the eternal relationship with the Lord. We're putting more money in that piggy bank for the spiritual piggy bank, which is really what's giving us that eternal connection. So the process of understanding and studying all of the different expansions is really coming from that space of giving us that knowledge, so that we have more clarity, we have more understanding in how to practice in our day-to-day lives. And so here, I know we can go on for a few more minutes, and I know we oftentimes will stop around like 8:30, 8:40, but I don't want to also just kind of talk endlessly about the same topic, but I also welcome any insights as well, and anyone sharing for today. If you'd like to share or discuss any aspects of today's class, and or aspects of this Bhagavatam, chapter that we're reading, the next few verses really go on to glorify the Lord and explain his dress and his ornaments and his look and the color of his skin and his hair and all of these things. So this is kind of reminiscent, or not even reminiscent. It's giving us a preview of what's to come also in chapter 10, where we see much more of this, the glorification of Krishna and his pastimes and his looks. And so this chapter is really giving us this deeper understanding of the Lord in our hearts, because it is so important. It's so important for us to understand our supreme position with that, the position of the Lord. And as I mentioned to you when we started this class, that there's multiple Bhagavad Gita verses that discuss this. The verse 7 in chapter 7, verse 21, I am in everyone's heart as the super soul. As soon as one desires to worship some demigod, I make his faith steady so that he can devote himself to that particular deity, this is in chapter 7's the knowledge of the absolute. And so here he's saying, he's giving us, the super soul knows everything. And that's the whole point of the super souls. We can't hide from the Lord. We can't hide anything. If we even hide it from ourselves, the Lord still knows. So here he's saying, whatever your desire is, I'll make it so that you can do that in a steady way. So Krishna knows our goals, our true goals. But if our goals are confused, and this is where things can get a little muddy, but Krishna knows our true goals, and he is going to help facilitate that relationship with a demigod. He'll facilitate our material activities through Mahamaya. He'll facilitate, our devotional life and pull us closer if that's what we are really desiring. So he knows our desires better than anybody, even ourselves. So because we are completely and utterly dependent on the Lord, even if we don't recognize it, the Lord is there helping to facilitate our desires. That's how much he loves us. He's given us complete independence, complete and utter independence. So he loves us so much, he's willing to let us go and be free and be away from him. And he's facilitated this whole material energy so that we can go and enjoy separate from him. How merciful. But he also created the entrapments of the material world. So we don't get too, eventually we realize like, gosh, this material enjoyment's not really, I'm losing my taste for it. Like this is, I enjoy one day and the next day I get kicked in the face. And then I kind of start to feel better. And then something bad happens again. And then, and then have a great week and everything's good. I'm feeling good. And then, no, not really. Right. And this is the roller coaster ride of the material world. So the Lord gives us free will. He gives us the independence to go off and do our own thing. But he also doesn't make it super pleasurable for us all the time. And for those who recognize that suffering in the material world can be remedied by turning our energies toward God, then find themselves starting to look within, starting to inquire, right? And this is those that come to God, the four different types of people that come to God. Those that have lost their money, that are, they're like completely destitute, the inquisitive, and the intelligent. So the ones that are inquisitive are the ones that are like, wow, this material world's kind of got me down. It's bumming me out. I think, I'm feeling that there's some other way. And those are the ones that Krishna finds most dear, is the ones that are coming to him from that inquiry, that are saying, I don't want this anymore. I want a relationship with you. I want to cultivate spiritual energies. I want to cultivate spiritual life and not focus so much on these material energies anymore. So, so this is the freedom we have as spirit souls. We have the freedom to participate and engage in activities that are going to take us away from God. And we also have the freedom to engage in activities that are going to bring us closer to God, closer to Krishna. So I'll go ahead and end here. And since it's 25 of, leave it open for any discussion or questions, and if anyone has any comments or thoughts. Quiet group today.
It's definitely a class that makes you think. The one point that I was thinking about was the way you said the beginner's mindset. In other words, back to humility again. And over the last few weeks, we have been hearing a lot more about humility than usual. And I think because it is so important. I had heard a very long time ago a class on humility, and I don't remember his name, but he said, if you're not humble, how are you going to learn? If you think I know everything that is there to know, then I'm not going to be open to learn. So that beginner's mentality, I think that's a nice way to put it, is a good way to think about. And about how we come to this process, sometimes I keep wondering about it, what has made me come? Was it difficulties? Was it, for money? I definitely did not inquire. It's not because I inquired, who am I? Where am I coming from? Where am I going? I don't know. I don't know why I've had the good fortune to be here, but I'm just very grateful that this is where I am. Don't know if it is very important to find out why. I don't know.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't know if the relevance is to why we showed up. It's that we're here. And the fact that we made a decision to engage in bhakti yoga, to engage in this process, that regardless of how we got here, that's probably irrelevant at this point, because we're here, and as long as we continue to work toward the processes of devotional service, and we stay in that, as you mentioned, the beginner's mindset. The beginner's mindset is really what's going to help us grow and keep our minds open to possibility. So, yeah. Thank you. Mukti Darthi. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mukti. How are you?
Good. Nice to see you.
I just wanted to ask, so many descriptions we see in the Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam tells about Krishna, his dressing and everything, how he looks like, how beautiful he is, and some people like sometimes they ask who sees Krishna? Can anybody say they see Krishna and everything? So how can you answer that question, Mataji? Some people say after that there is nothing. This is only life, and we have to go through all the miseries, and this is life. And after that there is nothing.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's more of a, I think, avoidist Mayavadi type of perspective. But I think to answer someone's question of who sees Krishna, well, we can all feel Krishna's energies. We can go to the temple, we can see the deity form of Krishna. But also, Krishna was here 5,000 years ago. And so if we take that faith in the parampara of bringing that knowledge through to us to understand how Krishna behaved, how he dressed, because he was here, then we can take that understanding to say, well, 5,000 years ago, he was actually here. And, this knowledge was carried down through the disciplic succession. And so, but Krishna is also, because he's the energies, he's everywhere, he can provide that understanding to those who are very elevated. So do we fixate on the fact, that Krishna wore yellow dhoti and had a peacock feather? We don't have to fixate on that, but it's more about developing that personal attachment, because Krishna gives us the two-armed form. As you remember Bhagavad Gita, he shows Arjuna the universal form. And Arjuna's like, oh my God, I can't take this. I mean, he was just blown away. He's like, stop, I can't see this anymore, because it was so ghastly. The universal form was overwhelming, and he's seeing these things being eaten up by the mouth of the universe. It was very ghastly and very overwhelming for Arjuna. So Arjuna's like, no, please, just show me your Narayan form, your four-armed form. And so then the Narayan form came, and it was, a little bit easier for Arjuna to process. But then he's like, please show me your two-armed form again. And he went back to the Krishna that, was the beloved, cousin to Arjuna. And so because Krishna gives us this two-armed form, because we are created in the likeness of God. And so Krishna gives us this two-armed form because it's easier for us to have a relationship with him, because we are created in his likeness. And so if we have a relationship with someone, isn't it easier to know what they look like, how they dress, the things they like to do? And so we're given this understanding to cultivate a deeper relationship with the personal form of God. And not all, a lot of religions only kind of talk about more of the Brahmajyoti form, right? The more of the Brahman effulgence, this kind of energies of God. In Christianity, I grew up with God as this big old man in the sky with a beard. That's kind of what came, that was what I was taught, but there was no form. And so in Krishna consciousness, we are given the beautiful blessing of a personal form to worship. And that is Krishna's beautiful gift to us, so that we can feel a connection to a personality that's more that helps us relate better to the forms in the past times. So for someone that says there's nothing that, how can you know this, or why would you want to know this information about how he dressed? Well, you can share that, well, this is actually Krishna's mercy that he's giving us his personal description so that we can have that personal form to understand him better by. And for those who say that, there's nothing after death, then, you can hand them books that say, like, look, here's people that had past life or had near-death experiences, and there's clearly something there. But we know through the disciplic succession, if we believe in the parampara, then we know that the universe is limitless, and that if we understand that our soul is eternal, if our soul is eternal, then that would immediately indicate that there's something beyond this material body once it perishes. So you can just give them that fact. Well, our soul is eternal. Our soul is spiritual energy. And since our soul is eternal, that means it cannot be cut, cannot be burned, cannot be destroyed, right? That means that it lives eternally. And so when the material body dies, the soul lives on. So then there is clearly something in the afterworld, but not for this material brain. Yes, this material brain, and you can say this material brain and this material body will cease to exist. And it will just become, worm food. It'll just become mud, nothing, ashes, this material body will just turn to ashes. And that's true. So you can maybe help reinforce, say, like, you're not wrong, because the material body does cease to exist and there's nothing for it. There is nothing for the material body, but the spiritual body, the spiritual spark, that spiritual energy will last forever. And that's where the life after death comes from, is from the soul, the spiritual body. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, I just, sometimes I give that one simple example. I don't know whether it is correct or not. I just tell them, like, you believe in history, right? There is long time back, people write it down that was happened, and they write it down the history book or something. Then you believe this, but when it's come to Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam, they don't believe that. I don't know that. Yeah. Also, sometimes, Krishna was there, and whoever sees Krishna and whoever with them, they write it down, right. Everything about Krishna, pastimes and everything. I just tell that example, like, if you believe history, because somebody write it down, and so this is coming like that. Somebody was there. Yeah. So I just tell them that.
Perfect example. Yeah. It's the parampara. And I think as soon as you put religion or spirituality in front of a book, people who are averse to spirituality and religion, to God, are going to reject it simply because of the nature of it. And as soon as you put academic in front of something, they will immediately embrace it, regardless of the source. So it's also their mood and their mentality of what they're choosing to, where they're finding their knowledge from, And so that's a great example, Mukti Prabhu. I love it. Yeah.
And one more thing I was telling to one person, like, she was like little arguing. Then I said, yeah, you simply just have to hear we have like 9 processes of devotional service, and first is just hear, and then maybe your heart will be changing slowly. Then actually, I think she got that whatever I was talking, like Navavidha Bhakti. Then she came last week she came and hear about Bhagavatam Katha in our satsang. And she was like, they were like asking about like reflection. Then she was telling that, and I was so happy. I said, oh, okay, she hears it.
That's a beautiful response. Come in here. Yeah. Hear for yourself, like, make your own decisions on it. That's a great one. That's the best answer. Really.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mataji. That's perfect. Hare Krishna. Mother Suman, do you have a question? Suman? Oh. She unmuted, but her sound, Shimon, I don't think you're connected to sound, so maybe. Anyway, any nice discussion. Thank you. Good questions. Any other thoughts or?
Very nice class, Mataji. And then as there are some people, they argue, did you see the God? So anything we don't see, but we don't see the air also, but we are breathing all the time and we are living.
Exactly.
If the air is not there, we are gone. The oxygen is not there, we are gone. So where is
exactly. Yeah.
So belief is the main thing. So
Yeah,
belief is the main.
Well, that's the first stage of devotional service, Shravana. Shraddha. Yeah, Shraddha is the first stage of devotional service. So we have to have that faith. And then we can,
class. You touched everything. It's very good class. I like.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other last thoughts before we wrap up and go about our Labor Day days?
Is one way to look at it that we realize the absolute truth in three ways: Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So it's a progression. Somebody who is at a lower level of understanding. And I think over the last chapter or so, we've been looking at that, I forget that word that they use, but seeing pantheism, seeing God only in nature. All of us, like you're saying, we are putting our little bit of our contribution in that spiritual piggy bank. And so through our lifetimes, we are, progressing. So this is also, maybe this person is still in that stage of seeing God only in nature, or, not being able to see, because I think it is at a very high level, you develop a relationship with Krishna in that personal way, right? I mean, so I'm just trying to understand how to see this person and how to help them keep going forward. Like, she had a great example, and she encouraged somebody to come to satsang. I think that is the best thing to do, so that they can hear continuously, because it is hearing continuously what we need to do to get further.
100%. Yeah. I mean, the thing is that having the different realizations, having the kind of the Brahman effulgence, kind of that more expansion, the energies of God, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, Prabhupada said, like, no, this is a progression. There's nothing wrong with that understanding of God. And that, ultimately we all are in different stages of our bhakti, of our spiritual life. So not trying to judge someone or cut them off because they're not in a similar stage, or they have a different understanding than you, because there's so many different ways that God gives us understanding, so that we can come to it at our own pace. And so that, that we have a world of 8 billion people. So we have the opportunity to understand God through so many different channels. And so encouraging someone to continue that understanding, but also continue to grow and maybe look beyond, or come to class, or come to the satsang and see how they feel about other aspects of that realization. Yeah, it's a good point. Very good point. Yeah.
There's another thing there, where as soon as we were born, we don't know who is our father is unless mother tells us.
Exactly. I love that example.
It's simple.
It's so simple.
So we believe on that mother, and we
believe it. Yeah, that's it. We just,
It's so simple.
Bhakti David Prabhu. Looks like you're good.
Hi, Hare Krishna Mataji. Hare Krishna, glories to Srila Prabhupada. I was just thinking, well, one thing was how much grace Srila Prabhupada gave us. Like, we would be nowhere without him. But also thinking about the Mayavadis and impersonalists, thinking about what is the game to having a non-personal idea of God. Like, I mean, a personal form, Krishna, is so closer and more important. And I think when, if you're talking to somebody who might be an impersonalist and think about, that form of the Lord, what form of that is helping benefit them? What are they getting out of it? And I think, having the personal form of the Lord is way more beneficial. Like, I don't see how an impersonal form, and an analogy would be like someone with a pet. When they have a pet dog or something like that, they come to love and understand this pet and see that as a living entity. But in terms of all other animals out there, they're kind of more impersonal, and they don't have that personal relationship with that animal, and they can be less compassionate towards them. So that's my kind of thoughts for the day that it came up as I was listening to you. And thank you, my teacher. Great class.
No, thank you. No, those are good observations. And I think, the impersonal, having that impersonal realization, that Brahman effulgence, that Brahmajyoti realization. I mean, I think it's a stage. It's because they're still receiving the energies of God, right? So, I came from more of a background of like just meditating on the void. And I remember feeling like good energy, like good vibes, it's, when you meditate on that, the energies of God, those who are in that space, they're really meditating on the energies of love and universe. And so they're feeling that that's all there is. And I think it's not that they're not getting something from it, because I think you can get a lot from meditating on the energies of the Lord, but it's not the complete story. So it's like, it's like you just stop. It's like you're going to the train station, you just stop. You don't actually get on the train. You're just like, oh, there's the train, but all you see is the light. And you're like, oh, there's trains here. And then you leave, right? And you never actually get on. So it's like you're enjoying that the train arrived, but it didn't fully get there. And so I think that it's that incomplete perspective. And so I think that there's benefit there for the practitioners, because they are, deriving some sort of relationship with from a voidist perspective. They're deriving kind of the energies and pulling that into they feel like they're pulling that in, or meditating on, or swimming in I've heard these different terms over the years, swimming in the Brahman effulgence, or swimming in the energies of God, or the universal energies. And so, but like I said, it's just incomplete. And so if you just gotta, let them know, like, did you know that there's like something behind that? Did you know, are you aware of the fact that actually those energies of God have a personality behind them that's emanating those energies? And if you go through on the other side of those energies, that you can actually cultivate a relationship with God. And for some people, that might seem kind of, esoteric, I think, especially in the Western world, excuse me, the relationship of a personality of Godhead is a little esoteric. Because from India, you have all the deity forms. So it's very natural. It's a very natural thing. But I think Westerners are more drawn a lot of times to just the energies of God, because it's more relatable to them in terms of their upbringing, and to not have like a deity form where there's an actual form that they can relate to. So you're Dr. David Prabhu, absolutely, like, yes, the personal form is certainly the highest, and it's the best relationship, and it's the most challenging too, because it requires this deeper understanding of God. So Acharya Prabhu, please chime in, because I know you're going to have some good insights on this. Save me.
Hare Krishna. Thanks a lot, Mother. I liked your explanation, and I really appreciated David's question and his analysis of it also. Prabhupada sometimes explained, and also not just in like the Advaita tradition in India, but very explicitly, if you look at like the Abrahamic religions, Judaism and Christianity and Islam, there's a kind of logic that's used, which is not exactly wrong, but it's an incomplete logic. And Prabhupada also explains it, that logic is, well, this world and this life, this temporary materialistic life, is full of form, it's full of personality, it's full of relationships. Therefore, transcendence has to be the opposite of that and can have none of those things. So it's not a crazy idea, but it's an incomplete idea. And the complete logic is not that materialistic life has form and personality and relationships and love and emotion, and therefore transcendence has none of those, but rather the complete logic is that transcendence has all of those, but in their perfect, transcendental, unblemished, uncontaminated form. That's actually the more perfect logic. So Prabhupada would explain like that. And if you study, the very, strict and traditional, philosophical line of Christianity and Judaism, they all explicitly say that God can't have any qualities or personality or anything, because that's limiting him, that's putting material designations on him, not understanding that those things also exist in a different quality in transcendence. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. That was an amazing explanation. Thank you so much, Prabhu. So great. Well, I think if no one else has any comments, I think that would probably be a wrap for today.
Yeah, I mean, I did want to go a little bit more, but I'll take it up. I think the next few verses will also allow for such discussions. But thank you. Thank you for
Great discussion. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. And thank you for everybody who contributed also. We'll see everybody, I guess, at the happy hour today at 5 o'clock and tomorrow morning again at 7:50.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhobhyo